500 Apache warriors materialized from the desert dawn like a nightmare from every settler's deepest fear. Except they weren't coming for blood. They surrounded Caleb Porter's dying homestead, facing outward, weapons raised against his enemies, not him. The sight should have been impossible. Apache didn't protect white settlers. They especially didn't mobilize entire war bands to defend a stranger. But 3 weeks earlier, Caleb had done something even more impossible. He'd shared his last water with a dying Apache warrior, knowing it might cost him everything. Now, as 7 outlaws rode toward his land with murder in their eyes, they were about to discover that some debts demand repayment, and Apache honor never forgets. The Arizona sun hammered down on Caleb Porter's homestead like molten iron. July 1883 had brought the worst drought in living memory, turning the red earth to dust and cracking the ground into broken promises. Caleb stood at his dying well, a pathetic puddle that wouldn't last another week. At 42, he'd survived the Civil War, buried a wife to cholera, and spent 15 years carving a life from this unforgiving land. His homestead consisted of a weathered cabin, a dying vegetable patch, and 3 scrawny chickens. His closest neighbor lived 12 miles east. Walking his fence line, Caleb saw a figure collapsed near the dry creek bed, a man in buckskin and moccasins. Apache. His hand moved instinctively to his rifle. The Apache wars had ended, but tensions ran high. As he approached, he saw the dark blood stain, the shallow breathing. The warrior couldn't have been more than 30, a bullet wound in his side. Every instinct screamed at Caleb to walk away. Helping an Apache could bring trouble from both sides. He barely had enough supplies to keep himself alive. But Caleb had seen too much death. He'd watched boys bleed out at Antietam, crying for mothers who would never come. "Easy now," Caleb said, lifting the warrior's head and pouring precious water from his canteen. The Apache drank desperately, then his eyes locked onto Caleb's with fierce intensity. Caleb dragged the wounded warrior into his cabin's shade. He tore strips from his last good shirt for bandages, cleaning the bullet wound with whiskey he'd been saving for winter. The Apache drifted in and out of consciousness for 2 days. Caleb shared water from his dwindling supply and his meager food. Hardtack and dried beans. He was gambling with his own survival. On the 3rd morning, the warrior sat up. He touched his bandaged wound, then looked at Caleb with something deeper than gratitude. Recognition. Respect. "Nahilzai," the warrior said, touching his chest. "Caleb," the settler replied. Nahilzai stood slowly, testing his strength. In broken English, mixed with hand signs, he communicated fragments: cavalry patrol, attacked while hunting, left for dead. Before leaving, Nahilzai removed a leather cord from his neck, adorned with turquoise and an eagle feather, and placed it on Caleb's table. He pressed his fist to his heart and pointed at Caleb. A debt acknowledged, a promise made. Nahilzai walked into the desert, disappearing into the heat shimmer. That evening, Caleb noticed his well water seemed slightly higher. The next morning, 2 cleaned rabbits hung from his fence post. The drought continued. Settlers abandoned their claims, heading east. Caleb stayed, surviving on the mysterious rabbits that appeared every few days. 3 weeks later, trouble arrived on horseback. 7 riders approached from the south with the loose, arrogant posture of men who'd forgotten consequences. The leader was Donovan Cray, a massive man with a scar running temple to jaw. Caleb recognized him from wanted posters. Cray's gang had terrorized the territory for months. "Didn't expect to find anyone still here," Cray drawled. "Just passing through?" Caleb asked, keeping his voice neutral. "We're setting up operations. This valley's our territory now. Only a few stubborn fools like you to clear out." The riders spread out, surrounding the homestead. "I'm not leaving," Caleb said quietly. "That's unfortunate." Cray drew his pistol and shot one of Caleb's chickens. "You got until sunset tomorrow to pack up. If you're still here," he grinned, "chickens ain't the only thing we'll be shooting." They rode off laughing. Caleb had no illusions. Fight 7 armed outlaws alone and die, or abandon his home. That night, he sat holding the leather cord Nahilze had left. He thought about riding to Prescott for help, but the sheriff was understaffed. He thought about running, but he'd already run from too many things. As dawn approached, Caleb decided to stay. If this was where his road ended, it would be on his terms. He didn't sleep. Instead, he watched the eastern horizon brighten, and then he saw them. They emerged from the morning mist like a vision, warriors on horseback, moving in absolute silence. 50, 100, 200. The count kept rising. 500 Apache warriors materialized from ravines and rock formations, converging on his homestead from every direction. They wore traditional clothing mixed with cavalry gear, carrying rifles and bows. War paint marked their faces. Caleb stood on his porch, watching them position themselves around his property. His heart hammered as understanding dawned. They weren't surrounding him, they were protecting him. The warriors formed a massive semicircle facing outward, their backs to his cabin. Nahilze rode forward, dismounting 20 feet away. Behind him rode an older warrior wearing a chief's markings. "Caleb Porter," Nahilze said, "you gave water when you had little, food when you had less. You asked nothing, expected nothing." He gestured to the assembled warriors. "A life debt is sacred. You saved my life, now my people save yours." The chief spoke in Apache. Nahilze translated, "Chief Delche says the men who threatened you are men without honor. They are a disease on this land. Today, we are the cure." Dust rose from the southern trail. Cray's gang, right on schedule. The 7 outlaws crested the ridge and froze. Their horses skidded as they processed the impossible sight. 500 Apache warriors defending a single settler's homestead. Nahilze raised his hand. 500 warriors notched arrows and raised rifles. "You have 2 choices," Nahilze called out. "Ride away and never return, or stay and learn what true warriors do to men without honor." Donovan Cray knew when to run. "We're leaving. No trouble." "Not just leaving," Chief Delche said in clear English. "Running. And you tell every outlaw in this territory, this valley is protected. Any who bring violence here will face Apache justice." The outlaws galloped south, riding hard toward Mexico. Caleb walked toward Nahilze and Chief Delche. "I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," Nahilze replied. "Debt is paid. Honor is satisfied." His expression softened. "But know this. You are marked as friend to the Apache. While we walk this land, you are under our protection. Not because you are white or settler, because you are Caleb Porter, the man who gave water when he had none to spare." Chief Delche spoke again. "The drought will break soon. When rain comes, plant your crops. This valley will be peaceful. The land remembers kindness, just as we do." The warriors departed as silently as they'd arrived, dissolving back into the landscape. Nahilze was the last to leave. "The cord I gave you, keep it. If trouble finds you again, send word through any Apache. They will know." He clasped Caleb's forearm. "You saw Apache, saw human. Not enemy, not savage, just man who needed help. That is why 500 came." 3 days later, clouds gathered. Rain fell for the first time in months. Steady, soaking rain that lasted through the night. Other settlers began returning to the valley. Word spread about the Apache protection. Caleb's homestead became a meeting point, a symbol of what was possible when honor transcended hatred. He never saw Nahilze again, but sometimes he'd find signs. A deer at his fence, arrows marking safe trails, smoke signals that felt like greetings. Caleb kept the leather cord above his door. When travelers asked about the strange peace in this corner of Arizona, he'd tell them the truth. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a gun or an army. It's a cup of water given freely. And sometimes honor demands that kindness be repaid 500 times over at dawn, when the world needs reminding that humanity can triumph over hatred.